All right, so we got a lot going on in the world of mixed martial arts, including the return of Bellator after a short hiatus. Bellator 258 goes down Friday night at Mohegan Sun Arena. Main card airs live on Showtime. The bantamweight title is on the line in the main event. Juan Archuleta defends his title against Sergio Pettis. If you look at this card, this is a fun one coming up on Friday, so I want to bring on the man, Josh Thomson, to talk all about it. Josh, how are you, man?
How you guys doing, man?
Doing great. It's good to have you here. This is a very loaded up card from top to bottom on Friday, but to sort of go back a few weeks, you know, the Bellator and Showtime era kicked off around a month ago, and they came out with some great packages. The open to the first main card on Showtime, paying homage to the old Strikeforce days. I mean, that was phenomenal. It just feels like it's a very, there we go. It just feels like it's a very big deal now that it's on Showtime. So what has been your initial reaction overall seeing this new era of Bellator on Showtime?
It's not even my initial reaction. What it comes down to is the fans have been reacting amazing. Like what I've seen throughout is like, I told everybody like on my show, I was podcasting weighing in with Big John McCarthy, that we talk about MMA in general, not just Bellator, not just the UFC. We talk about ONE, we talk about PFL, we talk about them all. But when it really comes down to is we're trying to get the fans to understand and start to appreciate the sport again itself and not just one organization. And so, that's really what we've seen from the fans. I've tried to convince them, you know, in that first couple of weeks before we went on the Showtime, like, hey, if you guys check out these first three cards, you guys don't like these first three cards, okay, then I won't ever bug you again about watching other promotions. And it just so happened that a ton of people reached out to me, like said, hey man, we're so happy, we're so thankful that you talked me into like, hey, check this promotion out or check this fighter out on this night. And that's kind of where I feel like my duty as a former fighter, former world champion, and just someone who's I grew up in this sport. I'm a nerd, man, when it comes to this sport. And so it's my obligation and my duty to show all these fans and all these new fans that are coming on, like, hey, this is a fighter to look out for. These two guys are going to make for a heck of a fight. That's my job. I don't just put that on the media. I put that on myself. And so I feel like right now, that Bellator right now is doing a phenomenal job in matchmaking and making sure that the fights are becoming more, and I wouldn't say they're becoming more, but are now more evenly matched to the point of like, hey, now we have the ranking system. Now we know who is number 4 and who is number 5, or who is number 2 and who is number 3. Like who is fighting who next? What do they have to do to get to the title? Now we have a little bit of clarity in that situation. And I think that was the first step in a huge direction that we needed to do, which is towards the top.
Some of those boxes that you've sort of checked off for the fans and that the fans sort of responded to, there's a lot of those boxes to be checked off on Friday. I mean, it's a really good card. And at one point, Josh, it was a really, 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 really good card.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we had some hiccups along the way. The James Gallagher, you know, that injury kind of stung for the Patchy Mix fight. Patchy fortunately stays on the card, but I think the one that really crushed people, and this is no surprise to anybody, was losing Yoel Romero from the Grand Prix and the fight against Rumble Johnson on Friday. Again, Rumble stays on the card, but how much did your heart break when you found out Yoel was out of the Grand Prix?
Yeah, you look, this is just a continuation of the 2020 crap year. But you know what? It happens to everybody in the terms of the promotion business. You know, I mean, there's been the UFC. It's happened to the UFC a bunch of times. PFL, it's happened to now, even though PFL is just getting restarted. You know, as far as ONE, I haven't been able to follow up in terms of if they've lost some fights because of that. But look, these are the circumstances that promoters have to deal with all the time. And so, you know, Bellator is just kind of just rolling with the punches, no pun intended. But they're going with it, man. And look, there was another fight on there that to me was going to be a fabulous fight. Was Lorenz Larkin, and he was supposed to fight Van Steenis, and Van Steenis got hurt. And that, to me, people don't understand how good Van Steenis is. And I look at him as like the potential, the guy who should be next, not next in line for a title shot, but next in line to be basically the head guy to run that division, 185 pounds, when Gegard steps aside. You know, if Gegard is able to continue to defend his title successfully, I look to see his teammate in Van Steenis take over for him. And he's on the right path. He's nasty good. He's good all the way around. His loss to John Salter, I think, was very eye-opening for him. And he understands now what he needs to do to take this fight game a little bit more serious if he ever wants to become champion. And Lorenz Larkin was a perfect test for him to see exactly where both of them would lie in that division. And so that fight to me was the one I was really upset to see lose. Don't get me wrong. Everybody that knows anything about the sport was upset to see that Yoel wasn't going to be able to fight. I got that. Okay. And then everybody that is James Gallagher is like the Floyd Mayweather. Everybody that they may not want to see him win, but they want to see him lose. So they're going to tune in to watch that as well. So those are 3 fights that I feel like we lost. But look, you got other fighters that are stepping in on short notice, making sure that the fight goes on, and I think I don't think this card has been hurt at all in terms of how good these fights are going to be. And look, and it's not even this card. I was saying when that card was fully shaped up that this is hands down the best fight card in Bellator history, just with the level of fighters that we have on the card. But the May 21st card is catching up now. Yep. And then I've also seen that, the Amosov and Lima card, that also now is starting to shape up. Maybe you guys are not privy to that information, but I am, but I can't tell you. So I'll wait for that all to drop. But I'm seeing that card come about, and I'm thinking to myself, dang, it feels like each card is starting to kind of outdo itself. I was a little nervous because after the May 7th, then you got Cyborg on there as the main event for the next card, and then you've got you got Fabian Edwards, who's Leon Edwards' brother. He's fighting Austin Vanderford on that May 21st card, and there's a bunch of other fights on there as well. But I'm saying that card, when this May 7th card was announced, I'm like, oh man, I wouldn't want to be fighting on the card right after, because you just all the hype, everything's already been pushed towards the May 7th card. But now this card is shaping up to be as good, if not better. And so I can't even imagine where the June card is going to go. With Amosov and Lima, that card right there, if that card starts to shape up to be as good as these other two cards are going to be in May, I'm excited, man. These cards that Rich Chow was able to put together. He kind of held these in the works before. He left to do another job, to take over in another business venture. He put together some really good cards, really stacked cards, and then the Mike Hogan and some of the other guys that have joined back together to make sure that the cards are running smooth. They're doing a fabulous job as well as putting these together. As long as we stay doing what we are doing right now, this promotion is going to be hard to beat. And I want to remind everyone, and I've said this, I don't know how many countless times, the organization that Scott Coker started before was Strikeforce. That was talent deep. And it went on to all become UFC champions. Almost all of them did. You had Robbie Lawler, you had Tyrone Woodley, you had DC. You got to remember, Cain Velasquez started in Strikeforce. You had all these guys, that were there. Jacques Ray, Luke Rockhold. All these guys were in Strikeforce. And I'm saying this with all due respect. I'm saying this with nothing but respect to those guys. This roster is way better. The Bellator roster is way better than the Strikeforce roster was, at the time that it got bought. And that talent pool was nasty good. You had Nate Marquardt, you had Fedor, you had Verdum, who became champion. Also, I keep forgetting about Verdum. They had a lot of guys that came through that Strikeforce roster, and people that had been cut before by the UFC saying that they were washed up and they were done. And then Coker rekindled their career. And then when Strikeforce was bought, they went over there and became champions and showed everyone how good they were. That was huge for Strikeforce. But I've been saying this for the last probably 4 months, 5 months, not just because I work for Bellator. This roster is stacked when it comes to the top talent, in the sport itself. But I want to remind people that it's better than what Strikeforce had when UFC bought it up.
Bellator, to me, and I've made this comparison before, it's like a fantasy football dynasty league where you draft a team from the draft, and then they're going to be good. You just have to wait a couple of years and everything will fill up. I feel like Bellator has done a great job, one, picking up some really good free agents along the way, some guys that were just outside the top 15 of the UFC, guys like Sergio Pettis, and then some of the prospects that they've signed. They've done a really good job of just loading up for the future. And one of those guys that they signed along the way was Sergio Pettis from the UFC, and he's getting ready to fight Juan Archuleta for a world championship, which is huge. And Archuleta is making that first title defense. That fight with Patchy Mix was absolutely ridiculous last year. Yeah. And Pettis has looked great since coming over to Bellator. The win over Ricky Bandejas was super impressive. What sticks out to you in this fight for the bantamweight title? What sort of intangibles these guys bring to the table that make you excited for the matchup itself?
Well, I think the movement's gonna stand out to me. If Juan Archuleta can keep his movement on point for 5 rounds, which we saw he can do, if he comes in as good a shape as he did against Patchy Mix, he got himself out of a lot of trouble in those first 2 rounds. And you could have easily said that one of those rounds was a 10-8 round, especially I think it was the first one where he just got dominated, had his back taken, and Patchy was just chasing the submissions over and over and over, and he was defending and defending. But it's the movement to me. Can Juan Archuleta increase that or stay with that type of movement throughout a 5-round fight and understand that Pettis, he's just going to stand in the center of the cage. He's not going to do anything that Juan hasn't seen before. He's going to stand in the center of the cage and wait for Juan to come to him. The problem is that Juan can touch him and still rounds that way. So Pettis is going to have to put himself outside the comfort zone and try to get after him a little bit. But can he do it without leaving himself out of position? That's going to be the problem. And so the other thing as well is, can Juan Archuleta take Sergio Pettis down? Can he do that? And so that's kind of the question, is if he can get Pettis down, I think he'll have a lot more success. And not only get him down, but can he hold him down? I don't think Pettis, don't get me wrong, Pettis he's got a good guillotine. He's got good triangles and arm bars off of his back. He's got a real good jiu-jitsu game from his back, like his brother did for a while. The thing is, though, is can he sustain doing that type of movement from the bottom throughout the fight and still stuff takedowns if he's able to get back up to his fight? The two of them, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work in terms of, look, if I do get taken down, do I stay active off my back or do I try to get back to my feet? Because it burns a lot of energy to defend the takedown and try to stay active off your back or try to get back to your feet. And when I do get back up, every time I have to get up, it's more and more likely for him to get taken down. So there's a lot of questions to be answered by Juan for him to go out there and get all those things done. And there's a lot of questions to be answered by Pettis is, can he stuff the takedowns and figure out ways to cut the cage off so Juan Archuleta isn't just kind of picking and choosing his shots and point fighting him to win the rounds.
I'm a silver lining guy, Josh. So when the Yoel Romero news came out, I was bummed, but then the silver lining in me came out. I said, well, I guess if there is one, it's that more attention can now be put on the title fight, because when it comes to some of the big fights on the books for the major promotions over the next several months, and you ran off a few of them already just for Bellator, this one to me is flying way under the radar, is it not?
In terms of the title fight? Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it definitely is. It's going to be an action-packed fight. There's a lot of things that can happen. Sergio Pettis has proven that he's way better at 135 than he was at 125. And when I had talked to him when he first came over, I said, like, what was the reason for wanting to leave? And he's like, it just made sense. He's like, look, at the time, Cejudo had just won the title, was kind of fighting at 135, wasn't sure if he was coming back down. He didn't know what the 125-pound division was going to do. And I had been through that moment when the UFC had cut the 155-pound division, and I got offered a contract to fight at 170. I was like, who am I going to fight? No one there is my weight. Those guys are enormous. I mean, I crossed the path in the hallways with Matt Hughes before. The guy's huge. He's like thick and no way. There's no way I'm fighting that guy. Like, I knew I wasn't a big guy. So I think with Sergio, I think it took him some time to realize that he had to work his way up to 135. He did it properly. He's had a chance to settle in against some of the other guys at 135 here in Bellator. And he didn't want to be forced into having to go up to 35 until it was his moment to make that choice. He also just didn't like the fact that he didn't know where 125 was going in the UFC. So he said, let me just get out of there and not have to worry about continuing to cut weight. There was a lot of talk I also heard that the UFC didn't really like him fighting at 135, and he was killing himself to get to 125, and he was noticing his performances weren't doing. He wasn't having the performances that he was having in the gym when he wasn't having to cut weight. So if you put a lot of pressure on fighters, to stay in a weight class that they feel like they just can't, they've outgrown, then it puts more pressure on them to win the fight. And so I think for him, when he decided to come over, it was good for him in terms of for his mental. And and people have to remember that for fighting, it's 80 to 90% mental. I would say even more sometimes, depending on the fighter. But I would say it's at least 80 to 80% mental for a fighter to understand that if I don't go into a fight feeling mentally ready, whether it's a weight cut, whether it's cardio, whether it's your diet and nutrition, whatever it is, like it just starts playing with your mind as the fight goes on. Oh, I got hit. Oh, is it because I'm slow? Is it because am I slowing down? Did I cut too much weight? Those type of things go through your mind while you're fighting. If you knew that everything didn't run according to plan, or there's more pressure on you from the outside. So I think for Pettis, it was a good opportunity for him to come in, and I'm excited for him, period. because this is an opportunity for him to solidify the fact that he deserves to be the champion.
I agree with everything you just said there. And before that happens, Rumble Johnson's back, 4 years removed from the loss to Daniel Cormier, leaves the UFC, parts ways. Bellator picks him up like days later, and now he's set to make his debut against Jose Augusto. You being a guy, Josh, that's competed at a high level, obviously with your analytical mind, you and John McCarthy do a great job on the Weighing In podcast. What burning questions do you have right now in regards to Anthony Johnson after 4 years away from fighting in the cage?
I don't have any. I don't have any. You want to know why I don't have any? Is I talked to Anthony the other day and he answered them all. So that's why I don't have any. All the questions that were answered that I needed to answer were answered. And I said, hey, how do you feel? I feel like a beast. I said, okay, like what changes should I see? He's like, you're just going to see. He's like, you're going to see everything that I couldn't do before. You're going to see it in this fight. But that was also before when he had just found out that he wasn't fighting Yoel anymore. So there was a couple little questions that I had. Can he stuff Yoel's takedown? And would Yoel shoot? And that was a question that even he had for himself. He wasn't sure would Yoel shoot. But now he's fighting a different fighter. He's fighting somebody who's a tough, gritty fighter. And Google, he's going to come walk forward, try to get through him, and he's going to try to touch him. If he touches him, there's a good chance he could put AJ to sleep. But AJ, though, to me has always been someone that people underestimate his speed and his accuracy until they get in there. I've trained with him. I've sparred with him. I've grappled with AJ. I understand all those things. He has that herky-jerky kind of stand-up where he moves his hands and he gets you all anxious and ready like before he throws. And you can't tell when he's going to throw, and he throws it straight and right down the pipe. So you don't see it until it's too late and it touches your chin. You can ask all of his opponents who've all woken up looking at the lights. That's exactly what happened. They just don't know what happens. They just said on 1 second, I saw his hands moving. And the next second, someone was standing over me, waking me up, saying the fight was over. And that's what you get with Anthony Johnson. You're going to always get that. The question is how hard can you make him work to stuff a takedown, slow him down, and not take any punishment? And I guess that's going to be the question that needs to be answered that night. Like I said, all the other questions they've all been answered already when it comes to AJ. It's just a matter of, I don't think the ring rust for him is going to be it's not going to be real, because he's got the equalizer. He's got the power in his hands, and he's got quick kicks. People don't give enough credit for his kicks. He's got a quick switch kick. It goes right to the head. He sets it up right off of his right hand or right off of his left hook, and he's had a couple knockouts in the UFC previously to that. So I think a big reason for him leaving the UFC was because the UFC struck that deal with ESPN. There was no reason for them to sign people like AJ back. We understand they understand where they're at now. The ESPN will pay them no matter who's on their network. And sure, if they do end up going over 500,000 buys, sure, they make a little bit more money, but it's not going to break them. They're already getting paid. It's become a business model for them, and that's why sometimes you get one good card that's stacked. They can outpunt the coverage, and make a ton of money on it. Like the show they had a week ago or 2 weeks ago, that show, and then you get a card like we had last night. They had on Saturday night. They only had I'd say 3 or 4 good fights on it. That's what you're going to get from the UFC these days. And so I think that's why AJ was expecting a certain amount of money, and they weren't. I don't think they were really going to go that way, given that their deal with ESPN doesn't obligate them to go that way. And so AJ has goals for himself, and so he decided, hey, I might as well sign with Bellator. Guess what? There's a huge, that's what kind of gave Scott Coker the idea of let's do this light heavyweight tournament. And UL became available, and it just made it even more enticing and more fun with the signing of Corey Anderson, and Nemkov beating Bader the way he beat him. It's like, okay, well, now we've got a ton of flavor that can be mixed into this. Let's do it. And it made sense. It was a perfect opportunity for AJ to come over to Bellator, a perfect opportunity for Scott Coker to put this light heavyweight World Grand Prix on.
And then how about Jose Augusto, 29 years old? What an opportunity he has in front of him on a week's notice. He's won 5 in a row, had a nice submission win about a month ago. And, you've probably seen it yourself. Most people you see on social media are just ready to line this guy up as another name on the long list of Rumble Johnson knockout victims. But like you said, Jose's a gritty, tough guy, and he's going in there with not a lot of pressure on him. Do you think he has the ability and the skill set to go out there and shock a lot of people on Friday?
Yeah, he's got the ability, and he needs to have the mindset. He's got to have the mindset. But if he's coming from that Patricio camp, which he is, he's going to have that mindset. And so, and the other thing too is all those guys in that gym, they never stop working out. They're training every single day. It doesn't mean that they're training hard every day, but they're in there refining their craft, you know, and there's a lot of top talent that's come out of that gym, and they're all prepared to fight, and they're all prepared to lay it all out there on the line. So AJ's got to be ready for that. The one thing that I think everybody wants the question answered, not just about AJ, is the inactivity. How is that going to play a factor? I don't see the ring rust being a factor because he's got the equalizers in his hands. But with being gone almost 4 years removed, it's a lot of things that you have to learn to deal with. The speed of the fight is never the same in the gym, even when you are active. So when he comes back that first round, he's going to have to figure out the speed of Augusto and Google. We call him Google, I think. And then it's like figuring out the speed of which he wants to fight, and knowing that you can't train at the speed that you normally fight at because it can't be done. You put a lot more pressure on yourself in the actual real fight versus in training. And so will he have an adrenaline dump? Will AJ have an adrenaline dump going into the second and third round? This is a 5-round fight. Let's remind people of that. It's not a 3-round fight. This is in the light heavyweight world Grand Prix. All of these fights, because the champion has to fight 5 rounds, all of these fights will be 5 rounds. And so this is a fight for AJ to come back after 4 years away, having to fight a 5-round fight right off the bat. So Augusto, all he's got to do is try and get him into that second and third round and see if there's an adrenaline dump and try and really put the pace on him, make AJ work a lot to defend takedowns, you know, to take shots, grind him out against the fence, maybe knees and elbows against the fence, you know, just dirty boxing, that Randy Couture style. If he can do something like that, he may be able to upset Anthony Johnson.
Patricky Pitbull set the table for his teammates, taking on Peter Queally. That's a really fun main card fight. But I think the other big storyline, at least in the main card, outside of the main and co-main, is the return of Michael Venom Page, takes on Derek Anderson, and MVP. Super fun to watch when he is on. I mean, I go back to that fight in Japan, and what an incredible performance he had that night. Everyone remembers the jumping knee against Cyborg and many others. When this guy is on, there's very few fighters more enjoyable and exciting in the sport than Michael Venom Page. But at times, in a lot of people's eyes, he's become one of the more frustrating fighters in the sport with some of his performances. Whether that's fair or not, it's all depends on who you are. But he's won 4 straight, 3 finishes. Derek Anderson's a tough out. For MVP right now, Josh, is the win enough, or does he need to go out there and make a statement, put on a show, and prove some of those doubters wrong on Friday?
Look, what's going to happen is I don't think a win's going to be enough. Fans that don't like him, they're going to continue to dislike him. And he's now becoming more of the Floyd Mayweather, like a James Gallagher, that people don't give him credit because they say, oh, look at all the flashiness. The reason why he is so good, like how Floyd was, is that he was so fast. People couldn't touch him. So he made it look easy. He's good. I mean, like if you go back and watch the Douglas Lima fight, he rocked Douglas Lima right before Douglas Lima dropped him with the leg kick and then finished him. Like he had rocked Douglas Lima. Lima will tell you he rocked him. You know, so in that portion, he was able to touch Lima in ways that other guys were not able to touch Lima. So when people don't give him credit, I just shake my head thinking to myself, you don't know what you're seeing. You're seeing another Lyoto Machida when Lyoto Machida was in his prime. People just didn't know how to deal with him. The speed, the accuracy, the movement, you know, just it frustrated people and made them lunge in. Ryan Bader fell victim to it back in his first fight against Lyoto. That frustration is real when you're in there. You want to touch him. You want to fight. I've seen other guys that's happened to. I cornered Gray Maynard when he fought Clay Guida. He was just chasing Clay Guida around. He couldn't get him to fight. It was frustrating him. Same thing when Gray Maynard fought Ryan Hall. It's like, come over here and fight me. And guys don't want to fight you. When it comes to Michael Venom Page, people want him to fight them, and he's not going to do it. He's just going to touch you and touch you. He's long. He's lanky. He's faster than all of them. You know, so when they leave themselves out of position, he's going to capitalize. Most of the time, it leads to a highlight reel knockout, unfortunately, for those guys. And so people continue to judge him based off of the style in which he fights. And some days you have great nights and some days you don't. Like the Paul Daly fight. Paul Daly understood the way to beat him was to make him come after him. And unfortunately, it was a boring fight. And then when he chased after Paul was able to get the takedown. And so those type of things is like a lot of people have tried to figure out that solution. Unfortunately, that solution is boring for the fans. But Derek Anderson doesn't fight that way. And so if you're thinking that Derek Anderson's just going to stand in the center of the cage and wait for MVP to come to him, Derek Anderson doesn't have that bone in his body at all. He's going to chase after him. He's long. He's lanky as well. He's going to try to put some hands on him. He's that kid that if you hit me, I'm going to hit you back 2 or 3 more times. And the other thing as well is Derek Anderson will wrestle. He will try and knock your head off, but he also will wrestle. He'll try and get after you with the wrestling as well as the knees and the elbows. He'll do everything to win that fight. He's someone that lets the full game plan go out the door once you hit him. MVP doesn't do that, but it's a matter of whether he can stop Derek Anderson. Derek Anderson going up from 55, fighting at 170 now, staying there at 170. He loves that. He feels better there. And he thinks, I think he's got a good chance of beating MVP. But I don't think the critics are going to be answered. Not until he ends up fighting somebody like a Logan Storley or a Yaroslav Amosov and trying to beat one of those guys, or an Austin Vanderford, or maybe even a Fabian Edwards, or a Costello Vancinas. Like I said, Costello and Fabian are in the weight class above. Sorry. But, fighting is some sort of a top wrestler. That's kind of, I think, what the fans are going to look to see. Is very much like how Conor was getting criticized when he was fighting guys that none of them had wrestled. And that's kind of where MVP he's put himself into, but the style that he has.
The prelims are really good too. We mentioned Patchy Mix. I know Lorenz Larkin isn't fighting Vancinas anymore, but inserting Rafael Carvalho is really interesting. Yes. Rafion Stotts versus Josh Hill is an awesome fight. Really looking forward to that one.
No idea how that didn't make it on the main card.
I was thinking the same thing.
Absolutely stunned that fight didn't make it on the main card.
Such a good fight. I know we only get a few more minutes, Josh, and I appreciate the time, but just to touch on a couple of things real quick. I know you talked about it with John on your podcast, but how fun is Yuri Prochazka? I mean, good God, it's just so fun to watch.
So I want to, this goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning, that there's fighters all around in every organization that are top dogs. Yuri came from Ryzen over there, and he had some great performances over there. And now all of a sudden, after a couple fights, now he's fighting for a title. Michael Chandler was never considered to be any good, and he leaves Bellator. Now he's fighting for a UFC title. They're everywhere. That's what I'm trying to encourage for all the fans. I put a lot of pressure on the media because it's the media's job. It's your job too, but it's the media's job. It really is, not just to cover the UFC 24 hours a day. It's the media's job to cover the sport of MMA. And now that we've got a consistent schedule, not just Bellator, but PFL and ONE, we should be expecting as MMA fans to see the media covering all of these events equally as much as they cover the other ones. Now, don't get me wrong. The UFC's got 600 something fighters on their roster. There's a lot to talk about at all times. I get that. I understand that, but I feel like the shows itself, whether it's Bellator or PFL, they don't get any media up until the week of the event. Well, by then, the fans have all made plans, and so it's hard to get them to sit at home and watch, that night, not knowing if hey, there was an event because the media hasn't done their job. And I'm not here to pick on you. Okay. That's a big reason why I started my podcast, is I really want to make sure that the fans understands which fights are out there to watch. They could be missing barn burners. We've seen some phenomenal fights, not just in Bellator and the PFL. And then, Eddie Alvarez's fight last week was absolutely insane. The fight was crazy, and to see Rory McDonald do what he does, go out there and dominate a fight like he did in the PFL. Think about this, how much pressure there is to go from another big organization and then headline your first fight again in another organization. There's a lot of pressure and money that comes with that. And Rory just continues to rise to the occasion. What a savage he is. And so I just think there's a lot of credit that needs to be due to a lot of these athletes. And I'm out here to go out there and do it for them, make sure that all these athletes are getting the publicity they deserve. But I put a lot of it on the media. We've got to talk about these athletes. We've got to let everyone know which fights to look forward to, especially like in the prelims, like Stotts and Hill. Are you kidding me? Are you effing kidding me? I mean, I'm getting that fight. And it's for free. I mean, come on. You got to be kidding me. That fight's going to be a barn burner. Patchy Mix is amazing. Just watching him grapple, it's nasty. It's so good. It's crazy to think how good he is. There's tons of other fights on the prelims that people should be tuning in on this Friday night in Showtime.
Here's just a little low-key one for you, ladies and gentlemen. Henry Corrales versus Johnny Campbell. Johnny Campbell, if you remember, his last fight dude's ear almost got ripped off his head.
Yeah.
Back like 6 months later.
And Henry Corrales is the junkyard dog. I mean, I want to remind people, he got his front teeth knocked out during one of his fights, and he just kept fighting. Didn't even bother. So like he's the savage, man. This guy will be there, and he'll be there throughout the whole fight. And he likes to lay down the hands. I want to remind everyone how he stood toe-to-toe with Aaron Pico. Aaron Pico dropped him. He got back up and knocked Aaron Pico out. They stood toe-to-toe and just went down. It was insane to watch that fight. And he's done that on countless occasions. You know, he's fought guys like Patricio. He's fought other top guys in the weight class. He's fought Manuel Sanchez. He fought all the best guys in this weight class. He maybe came up a little bit short, but he's fought all of them, and he's been in there with them all. And he's actually took a lot of them to the distance. You know, he fought one Archuleta to the distance. And they had some great fights. And so there's fights to be had on this prelim. If you guys are tuning in, I believe the prelims are on YouTube, Bellator's YouTube. You guys can tune in there for all their prelims there. And you can also watch Showtime as well for the main card.
So one last thing before we let you go. I know one of the topics you guys talked about on your podcast got a lot of buzz. It was about the whole Diego Sanchez situation, the release from the UFC, and, you know, talking about how that all went down, and, you know, the whole thing with his medical history and the emails, and, you know, this should be, you know, a check in the box, one of the many for fighters to come together. But you also mentioned like getting an insurance fund for the fighters. And when I watched the clip and when I read the thing on social media, I couldn't help but go back to an article my colleague wrote about Spencer Fisher and what his life has been like since he left fighting, and thought about that whole situation. And, you know, talking to my colleague, he thought the main purpose of him putting that out there was for things like that to happen, was for there to have insurances put in place for these fighters after their career is over, once the final bell has rung for them. So I'm curious, do you see a time in the near future that something like this can and will even happen?
Well, before I say that, like, I want to make sure that there's a little clarity on like my comments and that.
Sure.
And look, I said, we were talking, everyone, all these fighters, all these former fighters, all the ones that are kind of like getting ready to retire, or they're all talking about the Ollie Act. The Ollie Act doesn't do shit. It doesn't do anything for you. Like, that's the thing. Sure, the top guys can make more money, but most of these guys that were complaining, they weren't top guys. And if they weren't there very long. And then some of them weren't even world champions. They're the ones that were complaining. So the Ollie Act doesn't do crap for you. And so when it comes down to it, let's talk about the things that are going to help benefit these fighters' lives after fighting. Let's get them insurance. Let's get some sort of medical fund for them to make sure that they're taken care of beyond that. Look, the money is the money. They knew what they were getting themselves into when it came to the money when they started fighting. They knew it. So like, to say that they weren't going to make, a lot of these fighters, they've never seen 25 grand or 50 grand or 100 grand, and they're probably never going to see it again after they're done fighting. But the thing is, though, is that that's not going to be their main concern is the money. They can find a job doing something, but it's a matter of whether they have medical insurance to help cover themselves so they're not in debt for the rest of their life. So that's the one concern that I have for fighters. People want to talk about all the other stuff. No, we all knew what we signed ourselves up to. And I'm not saying that it's right. I'm not saying that we don't deserve more. I'm not saying that at all. I think we do. Okay. Not just myself. I'm thinking all the other fighters that have ever fought before me, they all deserve it as well. The thing is, though, is let's start with baby steps. You know, whatever you think the percentage is that fighters are getting now, I believe it's like 16 or 17% of this. I'm not just talking about they're talking about the UFC. So let's just use the UFC as an example. Is they're getting like 16%, I think is what it is. Sure, let's up that percentage now maybe to 20%. Let's start in baby steps. How about that? And let's first, when we up that money, let's start talking about the insurance program. That's the thing that needs to happen. Let's put the insurance in place, and then let's go with the baby steps in terms of upping the percentage of which the fighters get. Eventually, you'll get yourself up to, say, 35, 40%, somewhere in there. And by then, that's kind of an even playing field. The promotion's got to make the money also to help promote you guys and make you guys stars. You start talking about just the Ollie Act. The Ollie Act's not even a start. Like, it doesn't do anything. It makes the top talent, it makes them more money. The lower talent guys, they don't make any more money. So I don't understand what the big focus is on the Ollie Act more so than helping to take care of the fighters that are done with their career. You know, the ones that that are suffering from CTE, or the ones that have other issues. You had Tim Sylvia. He had the plate in his forearm now, and it's like, I guess, apparently rusting, and he's having some problems with it or whatever it is, and needs to have that surgery. The UFC ain't going to pick up his phone call. So that's my point. My point is, let's talk about helping those athletes. Like, I've got a plate in my ankle, from training and from fighting, those type of things. I need to have that plate eventually probably removed someday, so I don't end up like Tim Sylvia's forearm. I have my own insurance. I pay for my own insurance, but I've been blessed enough to make sure that I made financial decisions properly. I made really good money throughout my career, but that's not for every fighter. And so we need to think in terms of what can we do to help their life be better, and so what can we do? And that the number one thing we can do is make sure that they have a way to have some sort of health insurance that can take care of them the best that we can. And then the other money stuff, worry about that stuff. I don't want to say later, but let's try to slow play that a little bit. Let's say, hey, if it goes from 16% to 19%, and then a couple of years, we'll renegotiate up to 22%, or we'll figure out more numbers or different fees and see exactly where the money is in different levels. You can't just automatically say 50%. I'm sorry, you're going to put the promotion out of business, and then no one's going to have anywhere to fight. So they've got to find a way to work together. But do I think a union's going to happen? Absolutely not.
I agree.
That's the hardest part. And that's the thing that upsets me the most. You want to know why? Because the ones at the top never think it's going to happen to them. But I want to remind those people that are at the top. Okay. Look at all the NFL players and the basketball players that have made hundreds of millions of dollars and are broke. Mike Tyson, broke. Okay. The reason why is because they didn't make good decisions even when they were at the top. Okay. It doesn't last forever. So one day you may need to come back and ask for that handout that you don't think you're going to need to ask for now. And you're going to be kicking yourself in the ass. You didn't stand up when you could have and made a difference. And that's what I think a lot of people don't see, and I've seen fighters step on each other all left and right just to get to the top. And when they get to the top, they don't know what to do with it. And then they all flop back down and now they're at the bottom looking up going, man, that used to be me. And so it's frustrating to see the talent do that to each other. But I'm just speaking honestly. I speak from the heart. I wear my heart on my sleeve. And I've always been this way, and people don't like it. And that's why I've always been kind of called the punk. I speak the reality of life. And it's hard for people to understand that. And I've seen it too many times from way back in the day to I'm seeing it now. It's even worse now because the fighters are making more money at the top now. And so it's more of like, no, I don't got to worry about those down there or those people down there, but at one time that was them. And so it's frustrating to see, but I hope that if they do start a union, and I would love for them to start a union, but that the first thing be on the docket would be insurance. Not so much what fighters' purses are, but insurance. Let's start with that first to help take care of our athletes. If you really care about athletes, money doesn't always take care of athletes. The insurance will help do that.
Well said. And I hope if we revisit this 3 years down the road and we're like, oh, how far have we come since our last, since that first conversation, hopefully we've made some strides, like the baby steps. I think that's a good way to look at it and approach it.
Well, sadly, I believe we're still going to be wherever we're talking.
Yeah. Hate to be I agree with you.
It takes a leader. It takes a couple. If you tell me, I'm telling you right now, if you were to say, who are the top guys right now in the sport? Let's say, I would say for the UFC, because everyone's talking about the UFC and they're the ones doing it because, they're considered the number one company right now. If you took like a Max Holloway and you took Amanda Nunes and you took, who's their heavyweight champ?
Francis Ngannou.
You took Francis Ngannou, or you took John Jones, and whoever else is there. You take a couple of their champions or a couple of their big money makers. You take Nate Diaz, you take Conor McGregor, and they start their own. They're like, hey, let's start a fighters union. For whether it's just for the UFC or for the sport in general. I would almost guarantee that it won't be long if those fighters all said, hey, we're not going to fight. We're champions. We're not going to fight for a year. That the UFC is going to lose a lot of. They're going to lose a lot of leeway on how they handle things. Because if they say if the UFC is to go to ESPN and say we're not having any title fights for a year because all of our champions are refusing to fight because they don't have a union, they're going to get blown away. How much bad press would that have? It would only take 1 year. It wouldn't even take a full year, I don't think. If every champion said, I'm not fighting until we get some sort of medical insurance to cover us beyond fighting, or some sort of union to at least establish some sort of fund that goes into this. I don't think it'd be a year. I think ESPN would say, hey, we are guaranteed a certain amount of title fights, and on our network. And if they can't produce, that's going to change. That's one way of looking at it, but it takes leaders to do that. I don't know if you have any that will do it.
Yeah, that's always it seems like every time something comes up that leads to that conversation, I feel like we're just going backwards. You know what I mean? Like we get to this point, and even like a few years ago, we had all these different groups together and we thought something was going to happen, and then they do just diminish and fall off the face of the earth.
Well, everybody has, everyone likes to be upset about things, but no one wants to give solutions. You know, at least kick solutions off to each other. At least talk to each other and say, hey, this is what I think may work. And if it doesn't work, then like, let's try to find another avenue. But everybody wants to just criticize everybody else. No, I think the fighters need to sit down with each other, a couple, and just talk about it and hash it out and start maybe trying to make it go public, or talk with each other and say, what can we do to make this happen? You got to have solutions. Everyone wants to cry about it. They want to get on Twitter. They think people on Twitter care. They don't care. Like getting on Twitter, getting on Facebook and all these other social media platforms, and every day griping about your complaints is not going to make things better. Come up with solutions. Give me a solution and then try to work it from there.
You got me fired up, Josh. You got me fired up. I could talk to you for another hour, no doubt about that, but you're a busy man. You're getting ready to head out to Mohegan tomorrow as we record this, and I'll be out there the day after. So I appreciate the time, man. Really appreciate you came on short notice. You came in, made it happen, and I really appreciate it, man. I'll see you out in Mohegan, and let's get fired up for that card on Friday night.
Take it easy, buddy.